Well, I want to thank all of you that are here today. We're really excited about the topic that we're going to be discussing because so much attention has been given to the Legacy Project, the Rediscover the Falls, the whole historic area, both upstream and downstream from the falls, but not a lot of attention has been given to the locks. And believe it or not, they've been in operation on and off for 144 years, opening up in 1873. And some people have actually called the locks one of the most sacred treasures in the United States that nobody knows about. But recently, the Corps of Engineers has made a decision to decommission the falls and is looking to go ahead and transfer ownership of it to a new coalition of partners. And in reading some of the articles that I have, the mayor of West Linn is talking about how important it is that the falls, as well as their waterfront project, follow the direction of the Legacy Project. And what I mean by that is that they reach out to as many different partners as possible in putting together their coalition if they want to see success. So today we have a group of speakers. We have Trent Wilson from Clackamas County that's going to go ahead and give us some updates on what is occurring, specifically with all the players involved. We have John Williams from the city of West Linn, who's going to go ahead and share with us what the most recent plans are in reopening the talks for the West Linn waterfront project. They recently had an open house on June 6th to go ahead and start the outreach efforts again with the citizens of West Linn. They had at one time put together a concept plan, but it just didn't seem to meet the needs of all the people that were stakeholders. So they decided to go ahead and put that one away and start all over again. But as you can tell, the locks and the waterfront development for West Linn all kind of ties together. And then we also have Jerry Herman and Captain Richard Chesborough here today to go ahead and talk about some of the recreational aspects and amenities and opportunities, I should say, if the locks were to reopen with their various nautical vessels. So we appreciate both of you being here as well. So with that being said, I'll turn it over to Trent and let him get started for you. And I think you do have some slides for us today.
Yeah, I do have some slides. I find that pictures are a little bit better than my words. So we'll jump right in. I should say that the locks are owned by the Army Corps of Engineers, and the best caveat I can give to this entire presentation is that I don't work for the Army Corps of Engineers. And so those specific questions, I'm just going to have a little bit of a deferral on some of those things if they get that detailed. But the Willamette Falls locks, as Kent mentioned, were built in 1873, so they're 144 years old. And they were built using state, local, and private dollars. It was really just a way to get give farmers a way to navigate their produce around the 40-foot Willamette Falls down to the lower Willamette River and ship it back out. So there was a charge, there was a fee if you wanted to move your product around those falls through the locks. And then by 1915, there was enough of an uproar, enough of an issue where the Army Corps of Engineers came in, bought the facility, and provided free navigation. So that was done with a state match, 50% by the state, 50% by the Army Corps of Engineers, a few other private dollars when the Army Corps of Engineers bought the facility in 1915. So it's been in Corps ownership for 100 years.
How much did they pay for it, remember?
The state's match was $300,000, so roughly 600 to probably just shy of $1 million if there are other funds in there. Annualized over a lot of time, that's a lot more money than it sounds like. So what it was, for everybody that who's unfamiliar with the facility, is that it was generally through the Corps navigated or authorized to produce commercial tonnage or federal navigation, moving products, providing an economic benefit for federal value. And that was primarily done through timber and wheat. And for a time there, you can kind of see the process here, 1943 to 1997. For a time in the 40s, the locks pushed more commercial tonnage than even the Columbia River. So it was a high producer of products. So again, 1943, 2.2 million tons of commercial tonnage pushing through there. That's primarily logs, timber. By 1989, it drops almost 1 million tons. And what you can think of between 1943 and 1989 is the development of I-205, better infrastructure, better roads, more truck movement. By 1994, you have the Northwest Forest Plan, the spotted owl. Many, many less logs are being produced and moved or cut down. And then by the end of 1997, the full effect of the Northwest Forest Plan, the reduction of timber, has taken its full toll on the timber industry. There are just 1,761 tons of commercial tonnage annually, so basically nothing, moving through there for economic value. Primarily at that time, it's recreational movement that's going back and forth. And so it's quite a dramatic decrease over the last 50 years. By 2000, they were talking hundreds, just in the hundreds of boats who are using the locks at Willamette Falls. And so from around 2000 to about 2011, the Army Corps of Engineers really struggles to justify receiving federal funds to keep the locks maintained and operational because there's just no, at the top again, commercial tonnage to make it feasible for the Army Corps to manage it. So in 2011, the facility is closed somewhat permanently to navigation, primarily because the gudgeon anchors are at risk of failure. You can think of a gudgeon anchor as the screws that hold the hinge of a door. It's not the door, not the hinge, but the screws that hold it. And so if those screws aren't keeping the door tied to the mount, it's not going to function very well. And because water is so much pressure, you have to have those working perfectly. The facility remains a non-operational caretaker status. It currently has the ability to be repaired, but again, it's millions of dollars to do that. And again, the Corps doesn't have the justification through their federal commercial tonnage to make that case. The estimate that they've given everybody, the Corps has given everybody, is that it would be about $5 to $10 million to return the facility to operational funding, and probably an additional $5 to $10 million for another 10-year horizon of operational and maintenance funding. So roughly 10 to 20 million for the next 20 years if you wanted to see a continually operating locks facility. That number has fluctuated, but the Corps recently released a draft disposition study that said to get it at minimal level of operation for an annual consideration, it would be about 5.8 million. But again, the number has moved up and down a little bit, but that's their most current number that they've given everybody. And like I said, they're doing a current disposition study right now, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. A lot of state and local efforts are going on to try to keep the locks repaired and reopened, or try to get them repaired and reopened again. Primarily at the local level is the Willamette Falls Locks Working Group, which has a broad coalition of stakeholders. The Clackamas County is one of those groups. Oregon City is a member of that group as well, including West Linn, Milwaukee, Metro, PGE, who is a neighbor of the locks, as well as many other stakeholders, the One Willamette River Coalition, and Willamette Falls Heritage Foundation. It's a pretty big group, and so a lot of folks are involved to see this repaired and reopened. That's their mission, is to see the locks repaired and reopened for navigation again. Primarily free, but I think they would take what they could get. And as far as the state efforts are going, I'll just say that the Willamette Falls Locks Working Group has done its research and has looked across the nation and has seen that when the state gets involved in projects that are owned by the Corps but not receiving enough attention, getting the state involved really helps these projects move along. And so in 2015, the state legislature, at the request and through some of the advocacy of the working group, pushed forward a bill, SB 131, to create a state task force. That state task force was intended to look at some of the local options that we might have to help get the locks closer to a repair and reopen status. And in the process of that, they were looking at funding structures and governance structures, potential transferee considerations. But in the process of that, the Army Corps of Engineers stumbled upon an opportunity, is probably a good way to say it, from my perspective, stumbled upon an opportunity to apply for a pilot project to do a disposition study. The Army Corps of Engineers, in short, and I think they would say this about themselves, builds things. They don't tear things down, and they don't not own things that don't work. And so in general, they walk away from things if they're not functioning and if there's no liability to them. So a pilot project to move towards a disposition study in the Corps' perspective was a way to help the local process work towards something that they could get to, like a transfer of ownership, which might produce some opportunity to one day see the locks repaired and reopened. Because from the Corps' perspective, they're not interested in owning the facility anymore. Again, they don't see that national tonnage moving through there, and in their opinion, transferring the facility to a new owner is the most likely scenario to give the local stakeholders what they want, which again is repair and reopen. So what is needed to fix the locks? This is the technical part. Again, it's the gudgeon anchors. It's the screw that holds the hinge for the door. And does this have, you can kind of see here, this section right here in several of the gates, and in this part right here, which is underneath all of this, in some cases, all these bricks or all these concretes, hi Sandy, is really hard to get to. Some of it's really old, very rusty, it's really challenging, so the manpower to get to it is expensive in the Corps' opinion, and because those hold the gates, which hold the water, which would hold the boats, which would hold the people, it's very dangerous for the Corps to consider fixing those things unless they have the money. You can see a different picture here, and again, just where the rods have air versus where they don't, and where they go into what's solid concrete and they go straight down or at a 45-degree angle. It's just really challenging to get to those pieces. Another really cool thing about the facility is how old it is, and the interesting construction that was used to build it, including the ashlar masonry, which if Sandy was giving the presentation, I think she would tell you these came out of the Clackamas River. They were constructed with just classic or historical construction methods. Ashlar masonry is just smooth stone stacked on top of each other like Lego blocks, but without the locking mechanisms. And so really if they weren't as stable and well constructed as they are, they would be sliding around, which over time can lead to water seepage into neighboring facilities. And of course, in the event of a big shake, which we all have been told about over and over these last couple years, creates a few interesting dynamics for the locks as an operational facility. It also creates, in that case, an interesting dynamic as we consider the locks as a potential redundancy in the event of a seismic event. Certainly there's conversations about whether the highways will survive or the bridges will survive. So some people are looking at the river as an opportunity. The locks would be a primary component and resource in that case, but some work would need to be done to compress those blocks down to make that a viable option. And that's some of the repair costs that are in consideration. So the Army Corps of Engineers right now are underway with a draft disposition study. And so this goes back to that pilot project they were talking about. The disposition study is basically the Corps making the case that they would need to make to divest their ownership of the locks and say, we don't want to own this facility. These are the reasons why. And if we walk away, we need to walk away and address some of our liabilities. And our liabilities are A, B, and C. And their disposition study is 200 pages long, so I'm not going to go through all of it. But their recommendation from the study, their primary recommendation from the study, is to make a few temporary or a few repairs to the facility that would secure their liabilities. And their liability in the draft study is really identified as protecting the upper Willamette River pool level, making sure that the upper Willamette River doesn't change based on anything that happens at the locks. And so what they would do is do some secure work around the upper gates 6 and 7 to make sure that water flow up there in the upper Willamette River is unimpacted. That will not address the operational issues that closed the facility in 2011. And so the stakeholders, the working group in particular, as well as the broader coalition of interested stakeholders, have been very clear in a current and ongoing public process, public comment process, to say, your recommendation is really good to transfer. We're all on board with that, but solving the other problems that you closed the locks for is a little bit more important than just securing your investments. And we also think that your draft disposition study currently undersells the needs that are required to get towards a transfer, solve some of the maintenance and liability issues, and you just have more work to do. And so there's a lot of work right now going into the public process or the public comment process to respond to the Corps and say, good but not good enough. We hope you can accept some of these recommendations and make your draft disposition study better as it reaches its final disposition study. Really the case is this: the Corps is only going to look at their disposition study through a national lens, and that's their authorization to look at federal national tonnage and what that can produce. But there is, a lot of people believe, a good case to be made that there is local resources and local value to having an open and operational locks facility, including its value to the its value to the legacy project across the river, its value to recreational usage for boaters, kayaks, or even fishing, its recreational usage to historical tours that happen at the lower part of the falls and the upper part of the falls, potential business and commerce usage. We have a business out of Wilsonville who is adamant that they would be using the locks facility if they were open, and that they would pull, I think it's 15 trucks a day off the road if they could use the locks instead. So they are open to ideas about how to help us move forward with that process. A lot of invested stakeholders see value in the locks at the local level, and that's not going to translate into a national perspective. Before I jump onto this, I'd say that the local stakeholder group, the working group, is also currently undergoing a study, a local economic impact study, to help justify and make that case that there is a local economic value if the locks are opened. And I think that's going to be quite a significant finding to help either move the project in the right direction, or if it comes back with negative findings, which would be unfortunate, would maybe stall some of the local efforts. But I think that the case is there to be made that the locks has a big value, not just as a facility for navigation, but also for its impact to the region, its impact to the legacy project across the river, its value to redevelopment in West Lynn, which you're about to hear about, and its value to the Willamette Falls Heritage Area Coalition and the heritage area and possible designations they could get from the federal group. Also currently underway is Senate Bill 256, literally has a hearing in like an hour in the state legislature. And that would create a state commission to do a lot of the things that task force was originally planning on doing before the disposition study was going to go underway. So the disposition study is going to say, we want to transfer the facility, and the state commissions, if it passes, will say, great, so we need to find you a transferee. We need to find a way for that transferee to pay for the locks, so how to do some capital construction and how to have maintenance dollars. And also, since nobody else besides the Army Corps of Engineers owns a facility like the locks, we need to find new governance models to make sure that a new owner has a governance structure to maintain a facility like this that would have public access and public use. So we've already talked a little bit about the surrounding efforts, the Legacy Project, redevelopment in West Lynn as well, the Heritage Area Coalition. Many things are going on, as well as the value to Wilsonville and Newburgh and some of their industrial areas along the river that could have potential redevelopment opportunities if a facility like the locks is reopened. And I say that loosely because I think, and you're business owners, I'm not, I'm a government employee, so I say this loosely, but it seems to me that a facility like the locks, if a business is going to invest in river navigation, they're going to want to see some security, be able to have some predictable facilities that they can use and say, if I'm going to invest in a boat, I want to have a predictable resource that I can put my boat through to make sure I can go from the upper Willamette River to the lower Willamette River. If someone says, we're going to build a highway here, and you build a building, you're not going to be able to move your product until that road gets built. It's going to be the same thing for the locks. No one's going to invest into the river for a river transportation project if you can't go over the falls. Well, you can always go over the falls. We just want to do it through the locks, not the other way around. So I know there's going to be some questions here at the end, and that there are a few other presentations to go through, and I ran through this really quickly. But I'm going to open it up to some questions to what I just said now, and be open to that.
Thanks for the presentation. I had a question. I understand that to evaluate the worth of those locks, they need some measurement. The Corps needs some measurements. The working group needs some measurements, and those criteria, of course, need to be measurable. But it seems as though the Corps is only measuring on weight, on tonnage, regardless of the value of that tonnage. So if it was shipping gold ingots or if it was shipping balsa wood, no, that's the wrong way around. But iron versus wood, it's the same to them. They don't look at the worth of the shipments. Is that correct?
So not an Army Corps of Engineers employee, so I'm not sure how best to answer that question, but I think you're probably on the right path there, that I don't know if it necessarily matters the value of the product that's going through, like the value of gold versus the value of iron and its weight capacity. I will say that their measurement of tonnage is, in my opinion, slightly skewed if they're doing research now in 2017 about the type of tonnage that's going through the locks, and the amount of tonnage that's gone through in the last 6 years has been zero. Their case for tonnage is going to be zero. So, period.
In your research, have you found any other similar situations across the country there where the Corps has faced the same situation of a lock system that's not getting enough commercial usage, and what has happened with that?
Yeah, I think similar is a good operative word. The locks are pretty special and pretty unique and very historical. To have a channel that's kind of tight and 7 gates and 4 that do the lifting and the other 2 to kind of move things around. There's nothing specifically or exactly like our locks. I don't know of any exactly across the states. However, similar situations are out there. There's a good example in Fox River, Wisconsin, which is a river that comes out of the Great Lakes over a long period of river that is basically turned into a lake. You go up a lock system, another long river that's a lake, you go up a lock system. I don't know how long ago it was, definitely in the last 15 years, the Corps was trying to divest from that facility. They were going to, I believe, just walk away. The state of Wisconsin got involved, and they were able to negotiate a transfer to the state that was very successful. Just all cards on the table. And talking with the Army Corps of Engineers, they have looked at that example as not their favorite example, because it required them to spend a little bit more money into the transfer process. But in theory, we've been using that as somewhat of a gold standard or a precedent for how the Corps can operate a divestment process and a transfer, where what happened there, what was valuable was Wisconsin said, listen, you're going to spend this much money to get rid of that facility. Well, if we're going to transfer it and reoperate it, why don't you spend that much money and help us put some money into the repairs? And they said, okay. And they said, well, and actually, the value of the facility is this much economic value. So how do you feel about going about halfway, since you're looking at national and we're looking at local? And they said, okay. So they got a little bit more money out of the Corps, Wisconsin did, to working towards a transfer and some repairs. And so that was a great success story for Wisconsin. And even though the Corps got rid of a facility, which I think is a success story, they had to spend a little bit of money to do it. And that's, in their opinion, not a success story. There are cases on the other side, like in Kentucky, where the facility didn't create quite the national justification or have the local resources, and the Corps literally just left them as dams in the water. Trees are growing out of them. So there's 2 sides to the coin, and both are possibles.
Any more questions? Oh, hold on, Paul. We'll be right with you.
Okay, you ask this question. So the Willamette Falls Locks Action
Group.
Committee, what's it called?
Working group.
The working group.
Got real original.
Yeah. Where does one find more information about that group? Do they have a website? How frequently do they meet? Who all the membership is? I know you mentioned a lot of the members, but and they say that's an open, transparent process, but really this is the first time that I've heard of it. I'm sure others have. Can you tell us more about that group?
The Willamette Falls Locks Working Group has been meeting off and on, honestly, since about January of 2015. They were the primary stakeholder group. A lot of invitations went out to more city officials and then stakeholders that we knew about who were interested through local advocates and nonprofit agencies. It could be more transparent and open. It's not a public body. It's not a 190. It's not a district, and so its transparency rules are a little squishy, of course, but we try to be open. We're very inviting and very welcoming. That group is. I help staff it, so I can certainly loop you in on the email as an interested party if you're interested. But its value has been to help move some of these bigger processes along, like the state task force, which was a state mandated process. That was a public and open process that people could visit and participate in. The working group now is currently, we'd love to have more of a website presence or a place to direct people who have questions. but that just doesn't exist yet. And if Senate Bill 256 passes in the next week or two, fingers crossed, that would create a different process. And what would happen is if the State Commission was formed out of Senate Bill 256, the working group would essentially merge into that State Commission, and it would be a much more formal website-based, executive director, formalized process whereby you could have more of those public opportunities to participate.
I'm very concerned about the ability to create sustainable revenues or income to support any transferee that ends up with the responsibility of having this facility, knowing that in fact that obviously freight is not going to be a key thing, but to explore all of the different options that you guys have looked at, the team, the work group has looked at, to try to create ongoing revenue over and above freight.
I think you're right. And if I could pull a question out of your comments, I think it was, what else is going on besides freight? Is that?
Yeah.
I don't think that in my opinion, I don't think the locks survives as a freight-only facility. I think if it did, the Corps would still own it and still want to own it. I think the locks has its best chance of survival through its coalition process to say this is a recreational facility, this is a historical facility, and it has the potential for future freight opportunities at a local level. I don't think it'll ever produce the national benefit, especially like it was doing before the Northwest Forest Plan. That being said, just like anything else, like the Legacy Project in Oregon City or any other redevelopment of some sort of infrastructure, it's dependent on the many stakeholders that have a 5 or 10% investment in what that produces. And what I mean by that is, for Clackamas County, we're involved in this process because it opens up opportunities for communities within Clackamas County and residents within Clackamas County who want to see tourism, who want to see recreation, and who want to see some redevelopment on their waterfronts. And those different values don't fit perfectly within any one specific mission scope of Clackamas County. And the same thing would be true. I don't want to speak for John and West Linn. I think the same thing would be true for West Linn. West Linn doesn't own a facility like a locks system, and so to now own a big facility like that when you have no other industrial waterfront specifically that could benefit from that, the scope of where West Linn would be involved is in its availability to host a site like that and then have some recreational advantages to its waterfront park. Wilsonville has some industrial lands that could benefit by the usage of the locks because they could maybe potentially have some businesses that could use it and ship it down water and so on. And ODOT they build roads, they don't build water. And state parks builds on grass and not on water, but they have a water tour. And so all of these different coalition bodies have 5 or 10% interest in investments into this project. And that broad coalition creates a much stronger case for a redevelopment of a site like this. But I think you're right. One thing's not going to do it. It's going to be many, many things that do it together. Is that helpful?
Okay, well, we do have other speakers today, so we're going to go ahead and move along. But I want to thank you, Trent. That was a wealth of information. Yeah. Appreciate it.
Oh, yeah.
I think just in that short period of time, we learned a lot more of what's going on with the locks than we probably had any idea. And I really wish the best of success to your work group as you move forward in finding solutions and putting together this coalition team. But as Paul was talking about, from the economic standpoint, it can't stand on its own. You need more than that. And with that being said, it's a perfect segue for me to introduce Jerry Herman to you, who probably has more information and knowledge about the historical aspects of what took place around the falls, both upstream and downstream. And he's been very much involved with doing the narrations on a lot of the navigational boat tours up to the falls over the years. So, Jerry, and I'll let you introduce your guests. I see where Sandy Carter's here as well.
Come on up, Captain Chesborough. Let's give Captain Chesborough a round of applause. He's a real captain. By the way, that's the sound of a Willamette Valley steamboat, isn't it, Captain? Captain Chesborough is from the Willamette Queen down in Salem. He had a dream of bringing a vessel from the Columbia River, which was designed for the Columbia, on up to Albany. And he put that into that idea, that dream into effect about 20 years ago. Albany doesn't have much of a channel, but it's a neat place. They got old home tours and all sorts of things like that, so history works there. He moved it to Salem, what, 10 years ago? 19 years ago. Okay, all right, 19 years ago. My interest in this whole thing is I wanted to see the river history, wildlife, geology, economic development. When I was running the Environmental Center in Oregon City, I felt we need to see things firsthand. We took 20 tours to Champoeg-Newburgh. We're the only people that took tours to Champoeg-Newburgh because we could go through the locks. And then about 6 years ago when the locks closed, we didn't want the dream to die. I was no longer with the Environmental Center, but we decided, my group, Rivers of Life Center, to produce a series of upriver tours where we launched vessels above the falls. The Willamette jet boat's been up there about 4 or 5 times. Portland Spirit Vessel, Explorer's been up there several times too. So I have a real interest in seeing, one, United River, Upper Willamette River work together. And the history of our Willamette Valley is central to the artery of commerce. Captain Chesborough has 20 years involvement with these kind of vessels, steamboats, but he has even more experience with windjammers. Tell us what a windjammer is.
Well, a square rigger. You've probably all heard of the tall ships, and I had the pleasure back in the late 70s of owning a tall ship and becoming the first privately owned tall ship to actually compete in a worldwide tall ships race. And that was the Captain Cook Bicentennial race. So 6,000-mile race. And the interesting thing is that you're not allowed to carry an experienced crew on board. Like, for example, the various countries that own tall ships use them as training ships. So I fell into that same category. So we had 16 boys and girls on board as our crew members, all with no experience whatsoever, sailing 6,000 miles all the way across the Pacific to Hawaii, and then all the way up to Canada and all the way down. So it's been an interesting experience. I also took my family halfway around the world in a 45-foot sailboat. So sailing was kind of my early experiences. But riverboats have always been a real love of mine. And I was involved with a riverboat in Florida for a short time that was built in Wisconsin. And that gave me the idea to explore the history of riverboats here on the West Coast, and specifically in the Columbia and Willamette rivers. So my wife and I thought, well, maybe it's time to bring a riverboat back to the Willamette River. And because the only closest one was up at Cascade Locks in the Columbia River. And so we bought a boat from the Port of Cascade Locks. They had 2 riverboats at that time, and we brought it to Albany, as Jerry mentioned. And we've really enjoyed the experience. However, the locks have being closed in 2011 has posed a major problem for us, because now we are landlocked, if you will, in not being able to get to Portland for dry docking. And every 5 years, the U.S. Coast Guard requires that any passenger-carrying vessel, including even the ferries like Buena Vista and the one at Canby and the one we have at Wheatland Ferry, have to be pulled out of the water, lifted up about this high so that the Coast Guard inspectors can crawl around underneath and inspect the hull. And we did have an inspection that was due in 2015. And through the efforts of Senator Ron Wyden and Jeff Merkley and Kurt Schrader, we tried our darndest to get an exception because of the closure of the locks, but we lost that battle. And the Coast Guard shut us down, actually, for 1 month, until I got a phone call from a company up in Homer, Alaska, that said, well, there's another way to get your boat out of the water. And that's what we did in 2015. And believe it or not, we put the boat up on airbags that were longer than this floor right here, blew them up and rolled it up like you'd roll something up on logs. And we got it up out of the water. First time in the lower 48, a vessel of our size, 100 tons of vessel, I might add, was ever pulled out of the water in that fashion. However, it was almost 10 times more expensive than if we could have come down river and gone through the locks and gone to a regular dry dock here in Portland. So we have a keen interest, and our next dry docking is due in 2020. So I'm actively interested in seeing how this is going to proceed. That's a long answer to a short question.
It's a good answer, though. Today, who could not be with us was the general manager of the Portland Spirit, Dennis Corwin. They have a strong interest, too. They would be running Rivers of Discovery River Tours or Rivers of Life Tours above the falls as well. Willamette jet boats I mentioned to you. In order to launch, we take them on a big trailer. They weigh 10 tons, or the Discover boat I talked to you about, 15 tons. Launch them above the falls is kind of fun, but the first thing is, can we make this work? We have done this, like I mentioned, 5 to 6 times. Also, Captain Paul Simonis has the sternwheeler, the Rose, and it's below the falls. We're hoping OCBA, Oregon State Business Alliance, and others to bring that vessel in a special place into Oregon City's history for the long term. 1, to perhaps be involved when the locks open. 2, to perhaps be a showcase and a major focus anchor, visibility anchor for the riverfront that we call Oregon City. So those are some other people I wanted to mention. I wanted Sandy Carter to come up here. Sandy, would you come up? I knew Sandy when I was looking for young people, and I was younger then, a lot younger. I had hair then. Remember that? Yep. Sandy was a counselor at Oregon, at the Clackamas County Office for Children and Families. That's wrong. What is it?
I worked for Employment Training and Business Services.
ETBS. And she brought us a lot of youth to help build the environmental center. That's how I got to know Sandy. Then she said to me, you guys launched that boat, EnviroTrekker. I want to mention that. It's still in existence. It didn't get sunk again. 2 sea lions jumped in about 4 months ago, and there's 48 on the dock. I was thankful that 48 did not. 2 of them was enough because they weigh 800 pounds apiece. And at Sportcraft Landing, we had a problem. We're restoring that vessel right now. I hope to put it back in service because it was the first vessel that operated from downtown Portland. Really, it was Milwaukee, Oregon City, Gladstone, up to the falls. It has a bow ramp. Sandy remembered, she and I went on that tour several times. She said, if people don't like your tour, what do they do? I said, I put the bow ramp down and they can get off. Sandy's role, I want everyone to be aware of this. We wouldn't be talking about one United Willamette, one Willamette Falls Locks effort. The working group that's been discussed are all things that she and others worked hard on for probably 15 years. Is that true? Yeah. I'm trying to get you to say things. She's really a very assertive person. She's involved with the Willamette Falls Heritage Foundation. Is that correct? All right. And that's a Westland group initially, but has coalition members from all sides of the river.
The interests are for industrial heritage around the falls, which right now is a huge theme with the Legacy Project. Finally, people are waking up to the resource that we have around Willamette Falls as far as industrial history and transportation history in the locks, which are unique. So yes, I've been advocating for the locks and for industrial and transportation history since about 2000.
One of the things she asked us to do was take Darlene Hooley, then Congressman Hooley, up to the locks to help with some efforts to get the Corps' attention, take her through the locks, deliver her to the upper landing, Bernert Landing, historic landing in Willamette, district of Westland. We did that. And I'll never forget, when we were doing that, the lockmaster said to me, Jerry, can you go back and forth through the gates several times in that big boat of yours? I said, why? We need to count everything. Ducks, geese, beavers, because it has to do with how many lockages we open those gates and close them. I want to talk for just a moment, and Captain, you can help me. Come on up here. We're like my quartet. We're all moving apart here. We're supposed to stay together here. All right. The issue in the past was the tonnage. We heard our previous speaker talk about the tonnage issues. It was about 1.5 million tons. You tell me if I'm wrong, historically, about equal parts, 1.5 million tons of logs, aggregate, which is gravel, and then paper products. Okay, that's the reason that the Corps operated this facility. Am I wrong? Pretty close? Okay. All right, that began to diminish, as we heard, for various reasons. The logging, of course, is diminished hugely, and the transport of logs, that was 50,000 log trucks a year went through those locks in terms of volume made into rafts. That's a lot of transportation if you had that on the road. I wish we could harvest timber at least somewhat close to that, maybe not that number. And then the 500,000 tons of aggregate gravel, that's a lot of trucks of material too, if they were on the road. So Sandy and others have been trying to, and are making a case that diverting that transportation back on the river probably makes a lot of sense. I also believe that the tourism industry has a future. Can you tell us what you think you would be doing if your vessel could come to Oregon City?
Well, we would love to do that. Right now, we're hemmed in by gravel bars on either side of Salem. So my entire route right now is less than 2.5 miles before I literally would run aground if I tried to go any further. So it's not just the issue of the locks, it's also an issue of we would need a channel dredged between Salem and Newburgh. Wilsonville Sand and Gravel has done a lot of dredging in the Newburgh pool for many, many years. So the water is slow moving and it's nice and deep all through that from Newburgh all the way to the locks. However, south of that, it gets worse and worse. And we actually have 187 gravel bars between Newburgh and Eugene that are all showstoppers for any boat of any size. But there are boats that are very shallow draft. There's airboats that people have looked at, and the types that they have the big airplane motor on the back. But those are allowed, and that's an issue. But that is a. I would love to be able to travel back and forth between the locks and the upper river. The other option, of course, would be to move the boat down to Wilsonville, and we are currently even exploring that situation with dockage and facilities and so forth. Then we'd at least be a lot closer, and we'd be in the Newburgh pool. So, by the way, I wanted to just mention one thing. The Burnetts are good friends of mine, and I heard a statement one time that was shocking, is that one of their large barges is equivalent to 87 gravel trucks traveling down the road. And of course, a barge is just floating on the water, so absolutely no impact to the roads or the infrastructure.
Okay. And it seems to me the working group was even discussing perhaps food product transfer. Can you tell us about any other ideas?
Well, if I may, I want to add on to what Captain Chisborough was saying about recreation and tourism. Because I have a vision. Well, how many here watch Channel 10 at all? And maybe have seen, like those Moscow converted barge luxury cruises in Europe that people pay big money for and we all wish we were on. Well, my vision is we could have that on the Willamette. Connecting the convention business in Portland with upper river communities like Salem, Albany. When you think what we have up the valley from, organic farms, which people actually like to visit farms, wineries, the Willamette River Water Trail, there could be lots of loops where you ride the boat one way and then come back on a bicycle. It can be done. And the locks would be the star in that picture. The locks are the gate that's been closed. When they closed it, it's been this self-perpetuating doom thing. As someone mentioned earlier, Trent, I guess, said, when it's closed, people stop building plans on it. People stop having visions for it. If it's repaired and open, things will start to happen, particularly in conjunction with the wonderful work that's happening on the Riverwalk on the other side. People are getting fascinated with this area. The other things that we have talked about, and it should be explored in more depth in an economic potential study that's coming. The county just did an RFP, thanks to the county working group, which you're right, William, isn't very visible, but I'm on it. John's on it, and Sam used to be on it, right? And it's predominantly right now, the leadership is affected cities, elected officials, so that we can start moving some city weight behind the requests that we put to our congressionals and to the state legislature. And it's because of the effective work of the county working group that excuse me, I'm all excited, dry mouth, that we did have a state task force last year with Governor Roberts leading it, that we have Senate Bill 256, which would establish a commission very much like the Columbia Gorge Commission to be the management entity for the locks in the future and to help guide it through the transfer. So the county working group, Trent and his peers and leadership on the county level has been really important. But one of the things that we might envision with another economic study in more depth would be containerized ag products. There are some appropriate products to put into boxes, put them on a barge, float them down to Portland, to the Port of Portland or beyond. That, think of the railroads. Think of the highways. Everything is totally overloaded with freight now. So this would be a great green alternative. And it would take some time to set up ports again because ports have died as the business plans for the river went down. But between recreation, the Willamette River Water Trail, the tourism, the convention business, marine businesses like Bernert Towing, aggregate business, Eric Dye has a tugboat at Sportcraft. He works people's docks on the river when they need repairs. So there are lots of things that could make this a viable, multi-use transportation resource again, as well as an incredible historic resource.
So the question would be, he was talking about channels, and you referred to port cities that have been perhaps gone into decline or lost their channels. What do you think, Captain, the Corps of Engineers or others would do if all of a sudden the locks opened and were asked to grant permits for dredging, spot dredging? Do you think they would do that since it's a waterway of the United States? The Willamette River is a artery of commerce, a waterway of the United States. What do you think they would do?
Try to get out of it. That's been my attitude and my experience with the Corps.
Don't you think
but the interesting thing is that for every yard of gravel that is removed from the river, and there's many, many millions of tons, every year the river brings 6 million more tons of gravel downstream with it. But the Department of Lands will take that revenue, which of course the people dredging the river would be happy to pay, and that goes to our schools. So it's a win-win all around for the schools and for the state, as well as for the people dredging the gravel out of the river. And also, they would not have to keep tearing up fields and making new gravel pits all over the state, which are a real eyesore, and there's plenty of gravel in the river. But trying to get the Corps to do that, or trying to get the environmentalists to back off, I've been fighting that battle for 10 years at the state legislature. I've given many talks in front of committees. And so I mean, that doesn't mean give up. It just means we have a hell of a battle on our hands.
Well, and I believe I involve myself with a lot of environmental people, practical environmental people. I try to work with them that configure dredging to recreate values of spawning and things like that can be done. We have a rock bar problem near Clackamas Cove. That's a prime example of some spot dredging, minor dredging, and configuration for spawning. It's the approach that people take. The spotted owl is the problem, right? No! It was over-harvest was one of the issues, and then the barred owl came in and is now taking on the spotted owl. I mean, what have we accomplished here? Really, we need to get practical about these solutions, and I believe that $1.50 per ton is many, many millions of dollars to Oregon's schools. That's where that fund goes, and I think the agencies would work with us if in the process of what you're doing, of course, the whole lock effort, that we get more practical and look at solutions to the channels to commerce that will also feed the locks. Now, on your tables there is a flyer, and it has to do with an event in Salem, and you're going to say, why did they bring an event from Salem to you? Because this event is coming to Oregon City. Next fall, probably, or at least the spring of 2018, we want to do a series of programs called Harmony on the Water. Richard and I are doing this with a chorus and quartets and reenactors from your city. This city has a bunch of reenactors going down there to show the flag and link the two cities together, Salem and Oregon City, and celebrate history as it was. You know, in 1855 was the last time the city of Salem, the fastest boat on the upper river, I hope I got this right, was in operation as a showboat. It hauled people, products, you know, all sorts of things like sheep and things like that, livestock and whatever, but it also came into town as an entertainment vessel, and that's what we're trying to bring back. We think this would really work well above the falls, if the locks aren't open yet, in the next year or two, probably take a little while, above the falls at Bernert Landing, the most historic steamboat landing on the Willamette is Bernert Landing, above the falls at Willamette Park. And maybe in 2 years, the Portland Spirit said to me, why didn't you bring me this idea? I said, you didn't ask. Why don't we do the Sternwhaler Columbia Gorge in Oregon City at the biggest dock on the Willamette? You know, the Willamette River dock at John Storm Park is the biggest public marine board dock in Oregon, at least on the Willamette, if not the Columbia too. Wouldn't it be neat to see the Columbia Gorge sit there or travel for a week or so while these programs are going on? So I want you to be aware of this. This is what we're trying to do to draw the tourism assets of the two communities, Oregon City and Salem, together. Anyone have any questions? Am I going too long? Where am I at, Kent? All right. If you have any questions, we'd be glad to answer them.
Sorry, but I have to put in one plug for any of you who feel that your business would benefit from having the locks reopened. Please write a comment letter during this comment and review period for the disposition study. Tell them we really need to hear from people besides governments. We have a ton of governments. We also need to hear from business. And we can certainly provide all the information that you need to know, who to send your letter to. The deadline is July 12th, and this is really important. And I took that picture because I've probably spent more time at the locks in the last 20 years than anybody but the Corps of Engineer employees. So thanks for letting me put in the pitch for the comments.
Okay. Yeah. Any other questions, comments? All right.
Whoa. Now, aren't you glad you come to Oregon City Business Alliance forums? Look at all the information you get at these gatherings that you wouldn't have just by staying in your office or even reading the newspapers or going on the internet. I appreciate so much background knowledge that all of you have because you're so personally engaged in it yourselves. You've actually committed the sacrifice to see this through, and that's why we like having speakers like yourself. So again, I appreciate all of you coming today and sharing with us all that information. So to kind of go ahead and finalize our presentation today, as Jerry was alluding to the connection between Oregon City and Salem, probably a more important connection is that between Oregon City and West Linn for so many different reasons. And as we talk about the Legacy Project and the falls, we have to remember that we share the falls with our neighbor to the west, which is West Linn. And really the two go so hand in hand. And when you're at the Legacy Project, what are you looking at on the other side of the river? Well, you're looking at what could be a brand new redevelopment plan of some kind. And as I shared earlier, they had kind of a reopening of the community outreach on June 6th, where they had an open house to go ahead and invite citizens to come in and start talking about what they'd like to see occur in the various areas. I think you broke it down into 3 particular sections in West Linn that they're analyzing. So I don't want to steal your thunder. I'd like to introduce John Williams, Economic Development Coordinator for West Linn.
Community Development Director.
Community Development Director. There you go.
Yeah.
There you go, John.
Thanks, Ken. Okay, thank you, everyone. I have actually spoken to you before. Some of you may know me from my previous job at Metro, but I've been in West Linn for almost half a year now. And one of the fun projects to be working on is the Willamette Locks, the Falls Locks. Our mayor and our council and a lot of folks in West Linn are really enthusiastic about that project. And I think all the questions and the ideas that got raised here today and that sort of balance between community identity and economic profit and all of that, and is really sort of the question of the day, is what do we want to have in this community? What do we want to do with these old industrial developments that we have lining our waterfront, the locks certainly being part of that. You may know that West Linn has, I probably shouldn't put these together, West Linn has taken a run at waterfront planning a number of times in the past. In fact, we found in the basement, we found records of waterfront planning projects basically going back to the 80s, and some of you may have been involved in that. But I think there's always been a recognition that you have something pretty unusual here on the West Lynn frontage. You know, West Lynn has, I think it's about 8 or 9 miles of riverfront between the Tualatin River and the Willamette River. So West Lynn is just bounded by river the whole way. And what you have here is a planning project for about 2 miles of that, stretching from the Arch Bridge that you're all familiar with, down the Willamette River as far as the old settling ponds from the industrial developments. And so bounded by I-205 and the river is this area that I think West Lynn is contemplating over time could become something quite different, preserving some of the character there. We certainly have very strong interest in West Lynn about historic preservation and industrial heritage and all of that. That'll be a strong part of this, but there are some opportunities possibly for redevelopment. As Ken mentioned, we're just getting started, so I really only have a couple of slides just to sort of start putting this in the back of your mind. And if you're interested, let me know. We can get you more involved. But I really do think that a connection between West Lynn and Oregon City on all the planning that's happening really makes sense, because Oregon City's kind of got the jump on West Lynn, I would say. The legacy project and the work that you all have been doing along the riverfront for a number of years, I think has kind of inspired folks on the other side of the river to say, wow, there's value in these buildings, there's value in these places, and there's potential. So I think West Lynn kind of owes a debt of gratitude for Oregon City for the effort that's been put in and showing what can be made of it. And the exciting news that came out with the Riverwalk the other day just gets people more and more excited, I think. And we see it as a real opportunity someday to have an interconnected network here of paths and trails and businesses and all of that. It really only makes sense to have it be all connected. So as Ken mentioned, we're just kicking this off. We got real close a couple of years ago for a couple of reasons. Didn't quite land the plane on that last planning project. So we're trying to pick up everything we learned, everything we heard from the community, and bring back a couple of other options for folks to look at. And so we've really, in looking at the riverfront, this may be a little hard to see, but we've divided up into 3 districts that we think have really different characters and probably really different timelines and goals. Closest on the top there, the old City Hall district. You know, we have the old West Lynn City Hall police station by the Arch Bridge, and you've got this district that is kind of, I think maybe on the next, so on the top right slide, you know, sort of the spaghetti bowl of roads up by the Arch Bridge. It's a crazy little area up there. You've got roads at like 4 different elevations going from 205 to the local street. You've got a little road that runs along the river. It all comes together. It doesn't work all that great. I'm sure many of you have been frustrated by getting in and out of that area. West Lynn residents are too. So we're looking to connect with Oregon City and with ODOT and ourselves and look at the transportation element in here. But we also think there's perhaps a little bit of redevelopment potential down around here. If you've been around the old City Hall, great old building surrounded by a big old parking lot that is all owned by West Lynn Paper. And so while they're bringing trucks in and out of there constantly all the time, maybe there's some potential for this area. And I think that's an important thing to think about in this planning process. We have an active paper mill. West Lynn Paper is our biggest private employer. There's 250 employees in there. They make great wages. And so it's a real asset, not just to West Lynn, but to the whole region in terms of these manufacturing jobs. Thank you for pointing at the mic. And so one of the blessings and one of the real challenges of this planning project is you have an operating paper mill right in the middle of this whole district. We certainly don't want to do anything that threatens those jobs or that employer, but we want to look at what may happen over time, especially around them. So basically, you've got the old City Hall district. Next down, we're calling it the Industrial Heritage District. We're kind of considering that name, considering that some of it is Industrial Present District, but there's certainly some heritage in there. You have PG power generation in that area. You've got the Sullivan plant that's going to probably be there forever. You've got salmon ladders. But you've also got what is, I should have put in the slide, but what is the most amazing view of Willamette Falls, I will say that. The West Lynn side, looking over at the falls, it's pretty amazing if you get out on the edge. And I think there are some real opportunities in those old buildings that aren't being used anymore for paper production, for possible redevelopment, and we're starting to explore that with the community and with the paper company. Obviously, you've got a PG substation in there. You've got an operating power plant that's operating under federal rules. So it's kind of complicated, but interesting. The third district is totally different in character. So the Pond Redevelopment District, we're calling it the Redevelopment District because we do think there's potential down there. A lot of discussion in the community about what that might be, and maybe some folks think it's going to be redeveloped entirely into parks and open space. Some people think maybe there's some economic possibilities in there, or perhaps a blend. And so the questions about what the future of each of these areas becomes is what we're going to be asking and answering in the planning project. And I think it's an exciting project. So you've got 2 miles of riverfront, you've got a lot of challenges, huge big employer in the middle of it, but definitely some possibility. And so so here's just a picture of some of those things that are in there, right? It's a really interesting district. Another thing we've learned from Oregon City is that establishing some key values and goals for the project early on is really important. And I think these 4 categories will look kind of familiar to you because they're the same kinds of things that you're looking at in Oregon City, just slightly different words, different categories. The fascinating thing, we've done a lot of research on riverfront redevelopment projects all over the country, and these are the same things that every community wants when it redevelops riverfront. It wants jobs, it wants to preserve the historic character, it wants access to the river in a way that's probably been cut off for a long time, and you want to be able to get people in and out of there. And so these are really consistent from Pittsburgh to San Diego to Oregon City to West Lynn. It's the same kind of values, and they make a lot of sense. So what we're trying to figure out is how do these basic values fit into each of those districts? They're going to work in different ways. But I think at the end, what you're going to see is a plan that acknowledges, honors the history of the area, finds areas that are possible for redevelopment, and connects people of the broader region, not just West Lynn, to the river. And that's where we're going with this. And so, as Kent said, just had our first meeting in early June. Every planning project needs one of these. Timeline. Basically, we are imagining that by early 2019, we would actually be adopting ordinance language and code that would govern what kind of development happens. We would have a transportation plan, we'd probably have new zoning districts, and we would have that vision and timeline for each area. One of the most important bars is the one right on the top. That's the citizen engagement. Our council is very keen on citizen engagement, and we certainly want to bring that across the river. So we'd be happy to come back anytime over the next couple of years to talk to the Business Alliance here, talk to other groups in Oregon City. We really want to learn from you and connect with you and make sure that this project fits in with what you're doing. And so we're going to be having open houses throughout this year and next year. And that's kind of the 10-minute overview of what's happening in West Lynn. We do see the locks as being a key part of this, and we're really excited to be part of that coalition as well. So that's all I've got. If you have questions of me, I'd be happy to take them. I have business cards if you want to connect to the plan as we move forward. But I know you've heard a lot of talking, so get you at 1:15. All right. Are there any questions about the West Lynn side, or did you think of anything for Trent? I have some hard questions from him, but I won't ask them.
Ladies first, William.
A quick little question. Are you considering any multifamily or residential housing?
Well, I would say that all options are on the table right now. I think in this Pond Redevelopment District, there are some very large areas down there that are possible. People have talked about everything from senior housing to multifamily to townhouses to, as I mentioned, one of the end members is no development at all and no housing. West Lynn's a pretty interesting situation in that we really don't have very much developable land. Some of that is purposeful by the community, and some of it is just a matter of our circumstance and our location and being bounded by rivers and hemmed in some directions. And so I think when we laid out those pictures at the open house, we did get people putting sticky notes on there saying, great location for multifamily housing. And then we had folks who live nearby saying, but the roads, how are you going to get people in and out? And what about 205 and all of that? So at this point, it's all on the table. Yes, sir.
Thanks very much for being here.
You bet.
Although this is the Oregon City Business Alliance, we would be fools if we did not pay attention to what our neighbors across the river are doing. And real frankly, I don't think we're fools. So I'm glad that you're exposing us to what some of your plans are. It was a little light on the locks, however, insofar as how that's going to be tying into your plans. Do you have any more participation in that, in the locks themselves?
Well, we have been very involved. I've been involved for the last few months, and I've been in the city. The mayor has been a big booster, Mayor Axelrod, of this project. And I think we see the repaired and reopened locks as a really interesting and dynamic centerpiece of a redevelopment plan along the river. We're seeing the possibilities for tourism, for folks to come, to utilize the locks, to stop in Oregon City or West Lynn when they use the locks, if they're boating up and down, or coming as a destination and renting kayaks or whatever it might be. I think there's a really strong connection. The way I think of this area, you've got a whole bunch of really unique things. You've got these paper plants that are going to get redeveloped. You've got the Willamette Falls. You've got a locks. You have historic buildings, and all of it is additive in a way that makes it a place that people want to go. And so the more elements that you put in place, that you get going, the more you increase your odds of making it all thrive. And I think each one that you pull out and sort of don't manage to pull together makes it all just a little bit less likely. And so we're really excited about that. The locks are in the city of West Lynn. I would agree with what Trent said. We'd be a little scared about owning them. Taking on a facility like that is pretty challenging, but we're really up for the conversation about how we find a local agency or a local organization that'd be willing to take those on.
Here we go. You do have a question after all.
Well, I don't know if it's as much a question or some thoughts.
Comments welcome.
And Danielle Cowan, I'm the Director of Tourism for the county, and deeply involved in all of the most of the groups that have been mentioned. But I think one of the things that we've been talking about, I've been working about with West Lynn Paper, are actual tours that are going on now that you might recall went on in Oregon City too. And they're trying to develop that. We're trying to develop that help them develop it as a product. We are right now working on a camera on the falls to be, everybody was waiting to see when the giraffe would be born. Remember that? And not too long ago online. And now we're looking at the possibility of putting a camera on the falls so people can monitor the falls all the time from that spot. And it is a gorgeous one. So there's just a number of things that we've been engaged with to help develop the tourism components there along with the city and in partnership. So I think it's very exciting. We are also supporting and financing through tourism some of the economic development grant work that's being done on the usage of the river for tourism activities there, as well as on down throughout the heritage area itself. So there's a lot of folks engaged in this work, and so I just wanted to let folks know that we're deeply involved at it at the Tourism Development Council level, and working on some I think will be some really cool ideas in the near future, and the locks in particular.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Danielle. Yeah, Clackamas County and the tourism folks have been a great partner for us, and I know for the Legacy Project as well.
So, John, I had a question. As we look at your 3 different areas that have been identified to be analyzed, obviously you're dealing with different neighborhood groups from the Pond Redevelopment District to the south, as you go up to the Old City Hall District to the north. The access, obviously, to the Pond Redevelopment District would be totally different from the others. Are you treating it as one big master plan, or are you breaking it into analysis as to, well, what's most appropriate in this particular location as compared to maybe at another location?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think we really are looking at it as there's some common themes that the community wants everywhere, no matter what happens. But they really are 3 totally unique districts. And although they look connected, those of you who know this area know the connections are few and far between. And getting from the Pond Redevelopment District to the Industrial Heritage District, basically you've got Willamette Falls Drive, and you got a cliff down to the river, right? So you can get machinery in and out maybe on the slope, but really you're looking at Willamette Falls Drive as being the key transportation connection here. And Willamette Falls Drive, to be honest, is a real challenge for West Lynn right now. It has a lot of through traffic, people trying to avoid 205, right? So the 205 project may happen, but what we're finding is that people on their apps are getting a 1 minute less driving time and getting off 205 and taking Willamette Falls Drive. Some of you may have hit the intersection down there. You can wait for 30 to 40 minutes at the base now, Willamette Falls Drive, down at the Arch Bridge area before you can get onto 43. And so I think the way we're seeing it is probably the likelihood of development in this whole thing, it comes in from the edges, right? And the center is the hardest one to get at. And the center right now has an operating power plant and a paper company in it. And so where you may see development first is at the City Hall area, possibly in the Pond Redevelopment District next. But they may be somewhat independent of each other and really only connected by Willamette Falls Drive and by a trail. We are planning a bike and ped trail all the way along the river, which would be a great resource. And I think, again, fitting into that theme of what do you do when you come out here for the day, a 2 or 3 mile bike path along the Willamette River is a pretty cool thing. So I really do think it's thinking about how you get in and out of each of these separately in a way.
And I'm told your mic is going out, so I'm going to give you a
I'm not
new
holding
mic.
it close to my mouth either.
Water Environmental Services West acquired a portion of that pond redevelopment district, did they not?
Yeah, the pond on the left is the former Blue Heron Pond from the paper plant on this side. The pond the larger pond in the middle is the West Lynn paper pond. So, and the former Blue Heron Pond is now owned by the county.
Okay.
Yesterday we had a good meeting with some of your staff from West Lynn and ODOT. So I'm the Public Works Director for Oregon City. Good meeting. It was all about the project, the 205 and the project management team. We both need to collaborate on working with ODOT to look at, it sounds like from really 10th Street, your 10th Street interchange, to really our 213, 205 interchange, to look at that corridor in a more comprehensive fashion, not just from a moving traffic along 205, but at all of those interchanges. We're experiencing problems on our side, 99E and 213, and you're experiencing the same thing at 43 and 10th Street. In the sense, in our case, it's got some limiting effects on future development in Oregon City. I'm assuming that would be true for West Lynn. Probably not as much development potential with the exception of this project here. But I think that's important for you to know, and for many in this room who are pretty interested in development, that now would be the right time for ODOT to kick off a study that would answer some of those questions about capacity, what's the right measure for that capacity. So I just wanted to reemphasize, I thought it was a good meeting, but it was definitely the wrong folks in the room from ODOT. They were more focused on the project and giving us updates on the project. The other thing that I'll mention, and I think it's important for this group, is out of that we heard a little bit of the idea of maybe closing the Oregon City West Lynn to through traffic, which I thought for this group would be concerning. I knew it was for us, leaving it for pedestrian access only or bike access only, and just thinking how concerning that could be as a user of that facility. The Oregon City West Lynn Bridge, right?
So
I just I didn't want to blow that up, but I think that's an important piece, right? That's a very important piece that I think is a concern for the community on both sides of the river.
Yeah, well, next. I'd be happy to come back and answer that one. Let me just answer that one head on. I've heard the same thought from some people at very scattered times, that what if you made that a bike ped bridge and routed the through traffic? And I think where it comes out of is a frustration in the community, and you guys have this too, with the through traffic coming from a place through your community to get to another place, right? And the idea is get those people onto the freeway system somehow. And I think it's, you know, in this case, it's the 43 traffic going from Portland to Canby, right? I used to work for the city of Canby. I know how many people come from there. They go through your community too. And I think that is an idea that comes out of that sort of what can we do? People are, you know, it's impossible much of the day to turn left to get onto Highway 43 in West Lynn, right? Because of the through traffic. And so it's just a frustration. I don't think the idea of actually closing the arch bridge to vehicles is going to go anywhere. And I can't even imagine how it would be allowed if it was to gain some momentum. I will acknowledge it's something that came up on one of the sticky notes at the open house. So it's out there, but I don't think it really has legs, I would say. And Oregon City would certainly have a say, as would ODOT. Yeah.
I know along those lines there's been discussion and between the two, the Legacy Project and the other side with West Lynn, about the possibility of a walking bridge connecting the Riverwalk and the other side to have a full circle. Is there any real serious thought being given to that as an option? Because I think that might be pretty cool.
Yeah, I think that would be really cool. We've also heard that. Our mayor has heard about that and has. I went out with him one day at the paper company, and he pointed all over the place at places it could land, and we were looking at the Oregon City side and thinking how cool that would be. The challenge, of course, is you have an operating paper plant in your landing zone, and how do you separate out, you know, safety reasons, and how do you know, also the paper plant's on an island, so how do you get from that island to the other island, to the mainland? But there looks like there might be some possibilities, I would say, fairly expensive options, you know, to cross the Willamette River and to land probably on a roof of something over at the paper plant, and then crossing over the locks to get to the West Lynn side. But yeah, totally cool. And I think it falls into that idea of the more options you give people and the more things there are to do and the more interesting it is, the better. Yeah. Yeah, but you guys are generating a ton of interesting ideas, and we're just sort of gathering them and see how can we, you know, how can we connect to that? Yeah.
Anybody else? We're getting close to 1 o'clock. Well, thanks a lot, John. Just,
yeah,
again, just a wealth of information.